How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and as of late, Todd Howard, Bethesda, the entire team of Starfield, they've gone relatively quiet as we rapidly approach just 1 month until the formal release of Starfield, and understandably so, as they're putting on the finishing touches and trying to polish this thing as much as possible before it releases in September. And as a result, if you watch other Starfield content, you've probably realized it's gotten a bit stale, a bit repetitive, people talking about the same things. And so today, hoping to have a bit more of an interesting discussion about what I find to be the most interesting or unique aspect about Starfield, which is the procedural generation, and not the way that planets are created, as I feel as though that's been talked about to death at this point. More specifically, how Starfield procedurally pulls in locations to planets, and so it's going to be unique for every single player. And we've actually seen an example of this during the Starfield Direct. The camera starts off in one position, you see a certain point of interest, and then it pans and you see that a completely different location is now there. And this is pretty interesting. It is, of course, a massive shift from the way that all past Bethesda Game Studios games have been made, where locations were static on the map. So Snapleg Cave in Skyrim is always going to be in the same spot the first time you play and the 100th time you play. It's not going to change. Same with any location you see in any of the past Fallout games, it all applies. And this is a good way to design things. It means that the dungeons and the locations themselves are designed around the environments they find themselves in. So the Dwemer ruins in Skyrim go over rivers or through mountains into caves. However they want to make it work, they do that, and they adapt to the environment that they're within, making it interesting to explore the world itself, which is one of the best parts about a Bethesda game. And for Starfield, we do know that very specific story-based locations, it has been said, will always be found in the same spot. Specifically, just for an easy example, Aquila or New Atlantis, they're always going to be on the same planets, and that is important for story reasons, yes, but also for lore reasons. You think about the boundaries that some of these factions have. It wouldn't make sense if Aquila was procedurally placed on a planet. Just wouldn't work. So when it needs to be done, it is done, and that's a good thing. And I'm very curious to see how the story content and where those locations are placed are going to feel juxtaposed against the procedurally placed location. That is something I'm very much intrigued to see. But I am aware of several benefits and possibly several concerns that can be raised by using this type of system. There's a lot to be excited about. For starters, if you think about the emergent stories that can come about as a result of this type of design, that's exciting. Will Shen, in a former interview, mentioned explicitly how random encounters are no longer just finding somebody on the road the way that you would in Skyrim. Now it's coming across an entire settlement that has this unique problem that you can go off and explore and engage with and talk to the NPCs and have this full mini story within your character's tale that they're spinning. That leads to some exciting emergent gameplay. You're also, if you think about it, depending on how much time you spend exploring in any given playthrough, it's possible that every single time you boot up the game, you're going to find new points of interest that you've never explored before, and that's going to apply to every single player. So you go talk to your friend and they found this exciting location, and you found your own exciting locations, and you boot up the game a second time, brand new character, brand new build, and now you find some of those locations for yourself. It's a pretty intriguing way to experience the game over and over while still creating new experiences every single time. I mean, how many people have genuinely explored every single dungeon in Skyrim? Probably not that many. And one of the cool aspects about all of this is that Starfield's systems, when you actually travel to a system, are leveled. So that way, you know, anytime you enter into any particular system, you're not going to come across some random dungeon that you can't possibly complete because every single NPC or enemy in that building is a higher level than you. You understand that when you get to a certain location, it will be approximately a level 7 location, and you could either swamp through the whole thing because you're way overpowered for it, or struggle a little bit because you got some leveling to do before you're ready to take that on. And certain people are really going to like that, and certain people are really going to find that not too engaging. I'm sure there's mods that are going to address that part of the game. Again, some people will like that, some people will probably find it a bit unimmersive. Guarantee you that there's going to be a mod that randomizes all that stuff anyway at some point, so you could try that out if you're interested. For me personally, I think it's another exciting aspect of this type of system because you can come across, even in multiple playthroughs, the same location, but you'll probably discover it at a different level, so both you as well as the enemies will have completely different gear, and you might approach a dungeon differently than you did the first time based on the equipment that you now have, because of course, the higher level you are, the cooler stuff you're going to find. Assuming you're doing the exact same build, you might also be further progressed in some perks that give you some new unique abilities that you can use that you didn't before because they weren't leveled up as much as you are now. So that is interesting and exciting to me as well. And for those out there who might be concerned about random points being placed where it doesn't make any sense, for example, coming across a mine on a planet that explicitly says that the planet has always been barren of resources from its discovery, that doesn't really make any sense. You could argue, well, there's one moron who decided they would try it anyway. Sure, that's fine, but thankfully Bethesda can probably decide what types of locations get placed based on the planet. So for example, the most common instances we see of this in Skyrim is with loot. You might come across a random weapon, and Bethesda can specify, we want this weapon to match roughly the player's level, and we want it specifically to be a sword, or specifically an axe, so on and so forth. And so they could probably do something similar with the locations. This one we want to be a mine. You could choose any mine you want, but it needs to be a mine. Same with starship crashes, derelict ships, mines, outposts, whatever. Ideally, this will avoid the possibility of you coming across a crashed ship sending out a distress signal that's right next to Jemison, which is the planet where New Atlantis is located, and nobody's found this person for months, but that's because the game decided to randomly pull that location in a spot it didn't make sense. Ideally, that can be avoided. There are, however, still some valid concerns I think players can have. With any procedural content or generation system, it's not flawless, and as a result, until we finally get our hands on Starfield, we probably won't know, admittedly speaking, but there are some reasonable concerns. For example, because these systems are pulling in random locations, I do think it's entirely possible you unfortunately might get front-loaded with a lot of the less interesting dungeons that you could come across. It's just a common fact that not every single location that's created for Starfield is going to have the same level of excitement, either because you as a player aren't interested in what's there, or simply because it's just a less interesting location. It existed in Skyrim. You have dungeons that had entire quest lines specific to that dungeon, unique NPCs to meet that had whole stories to go about. Maybe you recruit them as a follower by the end of it. Then there were others that existed where you simply run in, get your loot, kill some enemies, and get out. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in Starfield, if you get a lot of those types of locations back to back to back to back, because it is just randomly being pulled in, it might actually deflate your excitement to go out and explore, and I'd understand why. Conversely, you might get a lot of the cool locations thrown right at you up front, and then every dungeon you go to subsequently feels a little bit subpar. Or based on your RNG luck, if the systems I discussed before about picking which type of location spawns in, if that's not in place, if you just come to mine after mine after mine after mine, and you just go, I'm tired of exploring these, I want something different. I think the major problem when it pertains to Starfield versus other Bethesda games is there's a lot more involvement and a lot more time spent to get to the interesting points within the game. So in Skyrim, you walk out of a dungeon, you go 500 feet, you're probably coming across something cool. That doesn't interest you, you go 500 feet in the other direction, you'll come across another thing. For some people, that's a bit too overloaded, and I understand why. But in Starfield, it's the complete opposite, where you need to fast travel, presumably behind an immersive loading screen similar to the grav jumping that we've seen in the footage, but you have to load into the system that you're trying to go to. Then you have to load onto the planet with this cutscene that shows your ship landing. Then you have to probably load into the dungeon itself when you want to go to the interior of it, do what's there, load back off of the planet, and then load into a new system or to a new planet that you want to explore next. You're stuck behind a lot of different loading screens to get across all these different things, so when you finally arrive at a location, you want it to be interesting. There's going to be no bigger disappointment than if this is a bit more of a time-consuming process, and at the end of all of it, you just stumble across uninteresting location after uninspired location after uninspired location. And it is worth saying, I do not honestly believe that's going to happen for most players. In fact, it's the complete opposite. I genuinely think the experience of exploration is going to be pretty enriching, but I do want to acknowledge the possibility that's there for the sake of being fair. And it is worth mentioning at this point in the video, I know and understand, and for those of you who might be confused a little bit, the locations themselves are handcrafted and then just procedurally placed on whatever planet it chooses to go into. I also do understand you're losing a lot of the personalization, where you look at, for example, Fallout 4 or Skyrim, where it was definitively done the best. I love that sense of exploration, and it makes the locations genuinely exciting to come across, and I'm wondering if Starfield can carry that same epic level of discovery that those other games have. But do let me know your preferences. Do you prefer Starfield? Are you excited for Starfield's new generative system, or do you prefer more of the static locations? I'm really curious personally. What's going to make or break the system for me is how they feel in comparison to the locations that are hand placed, the ones that are involved in the main story, and how those are designed versus how the ones that are procedurally placed are going to feel. Really raises quite a bit of a question for me. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.